I will teach you how to build healthy habits, not by forcing yourself, not by chasing after discipline that feels like a burden, but by entering the inner world where all habits are born. The truth is that everything you call a habit, whether it is nourishing to your life or destructive to your body and mind, is nothing more than a repeated pattern of imagination impressed upon the subconscious. When you recognize that all habits, good or bad, are simply impressions you have allowed to sink into the deeper layers of yourself, you suddenly see that you are not a prisoner of old ways. You are the one who holds the brush, painting every stroke of your daily experience. Many try to build habits by pushing themselves with effort, with guilt, with punishment, with external rewards. They say, I will force myself to wake early, or I will punish myself if I eat what I should not. But the truth is, what you resist persists. If you fight against an unwanted behavior, you give it more life. If you see yourself as struggling, then struggle is the habit you create. The effortless way is always the true way. A habit changes not when you beat yourself into a new behavior, but when you become the person who naturally lives in that way. Think for a moment of the simple act of brushing your teeth. You do not force yourself to do it. You do not stand in the mirror every morning and argue with yourself about whether you should. You simply do it because you are already the person who considers it natural. The difference between brushing your teeth and exercising every day, or between eating wholesome food and indulging in what makes you sick, is not in effort. It is in identity. You effortlessly do whatever your self-image has already accepted as natural. If you want to build healthy habits, you must go beyond the surface of action and touch the inner state from which the action flows. You must imagine yourself as the one who already lives the life you desire. You must feel the naturalness of it until it becomes so real within you that the outer world simply bends to follow. Let us suppose you wish to create the habit of rising early with energy and joy. The common approach would be to set alarms, make strict schedules, punish yourself if you fail, or bribe yourself with rewards. But all of that is unnecessary. Instead, at night, before you drift into sleep, enter the state of your wish fulfilled. Imagine yourself already as the one who rises early. Feel yourself stretching with energy, opening your eyes in the morning light, delighted by the freshness of the day. Hear yourself saying, I love how energized I feel in the morning. Allow the scene to replay in your mind as if it were the most natural experience of your life. If you persist in this simple inner act, the outer habit becomes inevitable. You see, the secret is not to fight with your willpower, but to shift your inner sense of self. Every action you take is the child of your imagination. If you are trying to force yourself to act against who you believe yourself to be, you will always fail. But if you change the belief of who you are, your actions change as naturally as breathing. If you have lived for years believing that you are someone who cannot stick to a routine, then every attempt to build one collapses. Not because you are weak, but because your subconscious insists on fulfilling the story you have accepted. Change the story, and the habit changes by itself. Instead of saying, I'm trying to build healthy habits, say, I am someone who lives a life of health and vitality. Let this become your inner speech. Let this become the way you see yourself. What you accept as true within will manifest as the natural habit without. Think of those who eat nourishing foods with ease, who exercise as if it were joy, who meditate daily as if it were as simple as drinking water. They do not fight for these habits. They live them because their self-concept has already absorbed them. You too can make every healthy habit effortless, but it begins by assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Every time you imagine yourself living as the version of you who already embodies the habits you desire, you plant a seed in the subconscious, and the subconscious is never barren. It accepts the impression and brings it forth. You may not see immediate changes, But the seed grows in silence. Suddenly, without struggle, you find yourself choosing the fruit instead of the processed food. Suddenly, without effort, you wake earlier. Suddenly, without forcing, you feel compelled to take a walk, to move your body, to drink more water, to breathe more deeply. The outer behavior emerges as a shadow of the inner reality. Do not concern yourself with how long it takes to build a habit. Forget the idea that it takes 21 days, or 30 days, or any number of days. Time does not matter. What matters is the assumption. Once you assume it as real within, the process has already begun. Some habits will transform overnight, others gradually. But each one must conform to the new identity you have accepted. Ask yourself, what does the healthy version of me feel like? What does the person who already lives in balance, in energy, in strength, experience daily? Step into that feeling now. Feel what it is like to be in control of your choices, not with struggle but with joy. Feel the satisfaction of living a life that honors your body and mind. Walk through the world in imagination as if you already are that person. That is the secret. If you wish to stop destructive habits, do not fight them. To fight them is to give them more attention. Instead, starve them by withdrawing your inner acceptance. Every bad habit lives only because you have identified with it. The moment you stop claiming it as yours, it begins to fade. Say not, I am addicted, or I am lazy, or I am undisciplined. Those are confessions of identity. Speak instead, I am free, I am energetic, I am consistent, and feel the truth of those words in imagination. Speak them softly, repeatedly until your subconscious accepts them. Once it does, the outer world must reflect it. When you begin to live this way, you will notice something miraculous. The habits you once struggled to maintain will now maintain themselves. The foods you once craved will lose their hold. The actions you once avoided will become enjoyable. The cycle of self-sabotage will dissolve, because you no longer see yourself as the one who sabotages. You have entered a new state of being, and from that state flows a new life. Do not underestimate the power of imagination in building habits. All outer discipline is temporary, but inner transformation is eternal. If you rely only on effort, you will eventually grow weary and return to old ways. But if you change your inner self-concept, you never return, because you cannot live contrary to who you believe you are. The strongest habits are not actions repeated until they stick, but identities assumed until they express. You do not merely do healthy things. You become the one who is healthy. And because of that becoming, every action you take aligns with health. That is the key to building habits that last a lifetime. Even if you have failed many times before, even if you feel trapped in cycles of inconsistency, you are free this very moment. Every past attempt belongs to an old version of you that no longer exists. The moment you accept a new self-concept, you are reborn. And the new you has no past failures, no old identity, no struggle. The new you lives in alignment with the habits you desire, effortlessly. Close your eyes and imagine now. Picture yourself walking through a day in your ideal state. See yourself waking with clarity. See yourself moving with strength. See yourself choosing nourishing meals, drinking clean water, breathing deeply, speaking kindly, resting peacefully. Hear the compliments of others who notice the glow on your face, the strength in your body, the calm in your mind. Most importantly, feel the satisfaction of knowing this is who you are. Allow yourself to rest in that feeling until it becomes natural. Return to this inner vision daily, especially at night before sleep, when the conscious mind relaxes and the subconscious absorbs impressions most easily. Persist gently, without strain, and you will watch the miracle unfold. Day by day you will notice subtle shifts, and then one day you will look back and realize that what was once a struggle is now second nature. Building healthy habits is not about force, but about acceptance. It is not about trying to become, but about realizing that you already are. The body follows the mind, and the mind follows imagination. Therefore, take control of imagination, and you take control of every habit in your life. You do not have to wait to become the person you desire to be. You can step into that version of yourself now, through the simple act of assumption. And as you walk in that state, every healthy habit aligns with you, not by effort, but by natural law. Remember, you are not your past habits. You are not your struggles. You are not your failures. You are only what you accept yourself to be now. So choose wisely. Choose to see yourself as the embodiment of health, of strength, of vitality. Choose to accept the image of the one who thrives in body, mind, and spirit. Persist in that choice and watch as every habit reshapes itself to match. The world around you may call it discipline, or consistency, or willpower, but you will know the truth. You will know that what they see is only the shadow of an inner transformation. You have not forced yourself into health. You have assumed the identity of health, and the habits have followed as loyal servants. This is the secret of all lasting change. This is the way to build habits that never break. This is the way to create a life of harmony, not by struggle, but by assumption. And once you live this way, you will realize there is no habit too difficult, no pattern too stubborn, no behavior too entrenched. For you are always greater than any habit. You are the one who gives it life, and you are the one who can withdraw that life. So begin now. Imagine the version of yourself you desire to be. Feel the reality of that self. Speak the words of that self. Walk in the state of that self. And as you do, the habits that once eluded you will arise naturally, effortlessly, unshakably. And you will live not as one who is trying to build healthy habits, but as one who already embodies them. That is the truth. That is the freedom. That is the life waiting for you now. The most wonderful part of this process is how subtle it feels when it begins to unfold. You do not always notice the exact moment when the shift has taken place, because habits do not crash into your life with thunder. They rise like the quiet light of dawn. You simply wake one day and realize you no longer crave what you once thought you could not live without. You realize that you move with more ease, that your body feels lighter, that your mind feels clearer. The change has already taken root inside of you long before you see it on the surface. When you live from this awareness, there is no such thing as failure. Every imagined scene is a seed, and every seed must bring forth after its kind. If you imagine yourself as strong, consistent, and disciplined, then life has no choice but to mirror that back. You do not need to worry about lapses or moments where you forget. The inner law is never broken by outer appearances. Even if you falter for a day, the seed is still alive, and it continues to grow. Soon the falter disappears, and the steady rhythm of your new self carries you forward. There is also no need to compare your journey with anyone else's. Each person is only experiencing the harvest of the seeds they have planted. Some appear to change overnight, others more gradually. But comparison is a trap. The only measure is the one within yourself. Are you assuming the state you desire? If yes, then all is well. Everything else will unfold in perfect order. You will also discover that healthy habits extend beyond food, sleep, and exercise. They enter into the way you think, the way you speak, the way you treat others, the way you respond to challenges. For habits are simply the outward clothing of inner assumptions. If you believe yourself to be calm and confident, you will naturally speak words of kindness and assurance. If you assume yourself to be successful and abundant, you will naturally build habits of focus and productivity. All habits are born from state. So if you truly desire lasting habits, stop chasing lists and rigid systems, and instead ask yourself, what is the state I want to dwell in? For from that state will flow every action, every choice, every pattern. Choose the state first, and the habits follow. Choose the habits first, without shifting the state, and you will always find yourself slipping back into old ways. This truth, once accepted, will save you from endless cycles of self-blame. You no longer need to call yourself weak or undisciplined. You no longer need to believe that building habits is hard. You know now that it is effortless. Because it does not begin in action but in imagination. The action only reflects what you have already claimed as true. In the silence of your inner world, form the picture of yourself living in perfect alignment with the habits you desire. Rest in that image as if it were already so. Saturate yourself in the feeling of it until it becomes your natural dwelling place. Then when you move through your day, the outer world will simply mirror what you have already accepted. This is the path of ease. This is the secret to habits that last. As you continue to practice this, you will notice that repetition in imagination feels different from repetition in action. To force yourself into repeating an outer act often feels tiring. But to repeat an inner vision feels effortless, even enjoyable. Each time you return to the inner image of yourself living with health and strength, you deepen its roots. And as roots deepen, the fruit must appear. You may not see the full tree overnight, but you know it is growing because the seed was planted in fertile soil. And when doubts arise, as they sometimes will, do not fight them. Fighting doubt gives it strength. Instead, gently return to your inner picture. Let the scene play again. Let yourself feel the satisfaction of already being the one you want to be. Over time, this becomes more natural than the old way of thinking. And doubt loses its grip. The old story fades because you no longer give it attention. And the new story grows because you feed it daily with imagination. Every time you imagine, you are rehearsing the future. The body, the mind, and the emotions cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined act and a physically performed one. This is why athletes train in the mind as much as in the body. This is why musicians hear the notes within before they play them without. You too can train your habits this way. Imagine yourself eating with wisdom, moving with joy, resting with peace. The subconscious accepts it as fact. And soon the body follows. Even the smallest habit can transform your life when born from this awareness. Drinking more water, breathing more deeply, taking a few moments for silence each day. These may seem like minor acts, but when they are lived as natural expressions of your inner self, they ripple outward into every corner of your life. You begin to notice that energy rises, clarity sharpens, patience deepens. And as one healthy habit becomes natural, others follow. Because harmony attracts harmony. The beauty of this way of living is that you are never a victim of circumstance. You no longer say, "My family eats this way, so I cannot change," or "I have never been consistent before, so I cannot begin now." Those are illusions of the old self. The moment you imagine differently, you step into a new reality. The outer world must rearrange itself to reflect the new assumption. It is law. Even when surrounded by those who live in old patterns, you do not have to join them. For what you assume within is stronger than what you observe without. If you carry the inner knowing that you are one who thrives in health, then no outer influence can sway you. The habit becomes yours. Not because you fight the world, but because you no longer fight yourself. You are aligned within. And therefore everything flows with ease. And you will find that healthy habits are not about perfection, but about alignment. To demand perfection is to invite guilt. To live in alignment is to invite joy. If you miss a day, if you slip in a moment, it does not matter. Because you know your identity has already shifted. A single cloud does not erase the sun. You remain who you have chosen to be. And the habit remains part of you. Because it is born of identity, not of rigid control. The more you practice this inner way, the more you see that life itself is nothing but a collection of habits, patterns of thought, patterns of feeling, patterns of action. And every pattern is subject to your imagination. You can re-script any pattern at any time simply by dwelling in a new assumption. No matter how old the habit, no matter how deep the groove, imagination is deeper still. It carves the path anew. When you begin to notice these shifts, a quiet confidence takes hold. You realize you no longer need to beg yourself to change or plead with your willpower. You see that life reshapes itself from the inside out. Every new habit becomes a reflection of who you now believe yourself to be. And the struggle that once consumed you dissolves. You are not chasing after a new way of living. You are remembering it as if it has always belonged to you. The mind, when left untended, clings to repetition of the old self. But the moment you choose a new vision, the mind becomes a servant of that vision. It arranges thoughts, desires, and impulses in alignment with the new identity. What you once called temptation begins to lose its voice. The foods, the distractions, the patterns that once ruled you no longer carry weight. They wither because your attention no longer waters them. You cannot serve two masters. And when you serve the new self, the old self is starved of life. This is why the smallest inner shift is more powerful than the greatest outward effort. Outward effort may last a week, a month, even a year, but inner identity lasts as long as you accept it. And when the identity is secure, the effort disappears because action flows like water downhill. It is not something you must push, it is something that moves naturally through you. Consider how a musician does not struggle to play notes once they have been mastered. The music flows through their hands without thought, without hesitation, because the identity of musician has been fully absorbed. In the same way, once you accept yourself as one who lives in health, every habit of health flows without effort. You do not think about it, you do not debate with yourself, you simply live it. It becomes your melody. And as these habits take root, you will discover that life itself becomes lighter. Your body begins to respond with vitality, your mind with clarity, your spirit with peace. Others may notice before you do, remarking on the glow of your skin, the calm in your voice, the strength in your step. But you will know that these are not random changes. They are the inevitable fruits of the state you have assumed. Every day gives you a new opportunity to choose this state. You are never bound by yesterday. Yesterday's actions do not define today's identity unless you choose to carry them forward. Each morning, you rise as a new creation. Each night, you impress the subconscious with the self you desire to be. And so the cycle continues, shaping you with a rhythm that feels more like breathing than like effort. If you ever feel discouraged, remember this discouragement itself is only a habit of thought, and like any other habit, it too can be replaced. Instead of rehearsing doubt, rehearse confidence. Instead of imagining failure, imagine success. The subconscious makes no distinction. It simply accepts what you feed it. Feed it the images of victory, and victory must become your habit. The more you practice, the more natural this becomes. At first, you may need to remind yourself to return to the inner vision, but soon, it becomes your default dwelling place. You will notice your inner conversations shifting. Where once you said, "I can't stick to anything," you now hear yourself say, "I love how consistent I am." Where once you said, "I always fail," you now whisper, "Everything is unfolding in my favor." And as these words repeat inside, your habits reshape outside. The law is simple, yet powerful. What you assume, you become. And when you become, you cannot help but express it. Healthy habits are nothing more than the natural expression of the healthy self you have chosen to assume. As you continue to dwell in this awareness, the line between imagination and reality dissolves. What once felt like effort now feels like the most natural expression of your being. You no longer think in terms of starting or stopping habits. You simply live as the embodiment of a new self. The morning stretches are no longer a task, they are a joy. Choosing water over sugar is no longer discipline, it is instinct. Resting early is no longer a sacrifice, it is a reward. The very things you once resisted are now the things you crave. For your inner self has changed, and the outer world always mirrors the inner. This is why the greatest work you can do is invisible to others. They may see you walk, exercise, breathe deeply, smile with ease, but they do not see the quiet moments in imagination where these acts were born. They do not see you lying in bed at night, rehearsing the life you desire. They do not see the silent affirmations whispered within. Yet it is these unseen acts that shape the visible. The garden blooms because of the roots, not the petals. And the habits that bloom in your life are only the visible petals of the roots you have planted in imagination. And so when you feel tempted to measure progress only by what you see, remember the root. Remember that every unseen moment in imagination is already progress. The habit has already begun the moment you assume it. The outer expression is only the shadow catching up to the light. If you persist in the inner, the outer must follow as surely as day follows night. There is great freedom in this realization. You no longer fear falling short. You no longer worry about breaking a streak or missing a day. You know that the true streak is in consciousness, and as long as you return to the inner state, the outer habits will continue to align. What matters is not how perfectly you perform, but how consistently you dwell in the state of your desired self. One imagined moment of success is more powerful than 100 acts done in struggle. And when others ask you how you have changed, you will smile. For how can you explain that the change was not in forcing yourself to do more, but in becoming more? How can you tell them that you did not build habits as one builds a wall, but that you became the version of yourself for whom those habits were inevitable? They may not understand, for the world believes in effort, but you will know the truth. That effort was never the cause, it was only the shadow. The cause was always imagination. And still deeper, you will see that healthy habits are not just for the body, they are for the soul. To forgive quickly, to release resentment, to speak kindly, to expect good, to dwell in gratitude. These too are habits, and they flow from the same inner law. To imagine yourself as peaceful is to live peacefully. To assume yourself as loving is to act lovingly. To accept yourself as abundant is to create patterns of abundance. There is no separation between inner identity and outer behavior. Every habit, whether of body, mind, or spirit, is but the child of imagination. And so the invitation is always simple. Step into the state of the one who already lives the life you desire. Not tomorrow, not after effort, but now. Feel it as true in this moment, and return to it again and again until it feels natural. The habits you desire will arise not as burdens, but as natural expressions of the truth you have accepted. As you give yourself more fully to this practice, you notice how the very atmosphere around you begins to change. The spaces you move through feel lighter, as though the outer world has caught the fragrance of your inner shift. You see opportunities where before you saw obstacles, you find solutions where before you found excuses. The habit of clarity replaces the habit of confusion. The habit of strength replaces the habit of weakness. And none of this feels like work, because it springs from a deeper knowing of who you are. Every day becomes a canvas upon which you paint with the brush of imagination. Each choice is a color, each thought a stroke, each action a texture. And when you stand back to see what you have created, you realize that the painting was determined long before the brush touched the canvas. The vision within guided every movement of the hand. So too with habits, the action is only the outer stroke, but the vision is the source. Choose the vision wisely and the picture of your life becomes a masterpiece. It is important to remind yourself that this is not a journey of punishment. Too many attempt to build habits through shame, believing that if they criticize themselves enough, they will change. But shame only strengthens the old identity. The one who says, I am broken, I am weak, I am lazy, will live habits that reflect those words. Speak differently to yourself. Speak as the one who already thrives, who already shines, who already embodies the life you desire. Your words are seeds. Plant them with care, and they will bloom as habits of greatness. When you notice an old pattern resurfacing, do not despair. See it only as proof that you are aware. Awareness itself is victory, for without awareness there is no choice. The moment you see the old pattern, you have the power to imagine the new. You may choose again. And each time you choose, you strengthen the new identity. Like a path walked repeatedly through a forest, the new way becomes easier, clearer, smoother, until it is the only path you naturally take. And as this deepens, you will discover a new sense of time. You no longer rush to the future, thinking you will one day arrive at health or discipline. You dwell in the present, knowing you already are the one you desire to be. From this present state, the future unfolds with grace. You no longer count days or weeks or months to measure your habits. You live fully now, and in living now, the habits sustain themselves. This shift may feel subtle, but it is powerful. The need for constant self-monitoring disappears. The energy wasted in fighting with yourself is freed for creation. The guilt that once weighed you down, lifts replaced by joy. And joy itself becomes a habit, the habit of aligning with who you truly are. As the rhythm of this new way of living settles into you, something remarkable unfolds. You begin to see that habits are not chains that bind but wings that lift. What once felt like endless cycles of struggle now feels like effortless motion, like the current of a river carrying you forward. You are no longer the one who pushes against life. You are the one who moves with it, carried by the unseen law you have chosen to honor. You notice how naturally your environment begins to reflect these inner choices. The foods you once overlooked now call to you. The books, the conversations, the surroundings that once seemed unimportant now seem magnetic, drawing you deeper into harmony with your assumed identity. Even those around you shift. Some rise to meet your new vibration, while others fade quietly from your circle. This too is part of the habit of alignment. The outer world reshapes itself in service of the self you have accepted. Each repetition in imagination strengthens the roots. And though others may not understand, you know that the invisible work is the true foundation. You may be sitting quietly, eyes closed, rehearsing the feeling of vitality and strength, and to the world it appears as nothing. Yet that moment is more powerful than 1,000 forced actions, for it is the act of planting the seed from which every habit grows. And when the results begin to show, you marvel at how inevitable they feel. You no longer say, "I hope I can keep this up." You simply know that you will. Because the habits are no longer something you do, they are something you are. The old self who resisted them no longer exists, and the new self who lives them has taken its place. This is the beauty of transformation. It does not require you to fight, it requires you to release. Release the old story, and the new one writes itself. Even in the smallest details of life you notice the difference. You take a deeper breath before speaking, and your words carry more weight. You pause before reacting, and your choices hold more wisdom. You wake in the morning with gratitude instead of dread. These subtle habits may seem small, yet they weave together into a life of profound change. And you realize that no habit is truly small, for each is a thread in the great fabric of your reality. The more you dwell in this, the more your confidence grows. Not arrogance, not pride, but a steady assurance that life is under your direction. You do not fear losing your progress, because progress is no longer fragile. It is secured in identity, and identity does not break. You may bend, you may sway, but you do not return to what you once were. For that version of you has dissolved. And with every passing day you see more clearly that there was never any struggle except the struggle to accept who you already are. Once you surrendered to the vision, once you allowed it to sink deep into the soil of your subconscious, the habits flowered of their own accord. The great secret was never effort. It was assumption. And assumption, when held with persistence, becomes the most natural thing in the world. As you keep walking in this awareness, the boundaries of what you once thought possible begin to dissolve. Habits you once believed were beyond your reach now feel simple, as though they were always a part of you. The very idea of difficulty begins to lose meaning, for difficulty only existed when you saw yourself as separate from the state you desired. Now when you accept the identity first, the outer actions line up like steps on a path you were always meant to take. Even the way you carry yourself changes. The posture of your body shifts. The tone of your voice steadies. The light in your eyes grows brighter. These are not forced displays of discipline, they are natural outpourings of the self you have assumed. The body cannot help but reflect the mind, and the mind cannot help but reflect the imagination. In this chain, imagination is always the root, and habits are always the fruit. There are moments where you may feel the echo of the old ways calling you back, but even these moments become proof of your growth. For when you notice the echo, you also notice that you are no longer the one who answers it. You are no longer compelled in the same way, for the call does not belong to the self you have chosen. The echo fades, as all old things fade when they are no longer fed with belief. What once felt like sacrifice now feels like freedom. To choose nourishing food over what once harmed you feels like liberation. To rise early feels like receiving a gift. To move your body with intention feels like an act of gratitude. These are no longer heavy demands but joyful responses. You have stepped into a rhythm where life supports you rather than opposes you. And in this rhythm, every habit you desire finds its place with ease. The people around you may look on with amazement. They may ask how you found such consistency, how you discovered such energy, how you built such strength. And you will know that the answer cannot truly be explained in words. For it was not a strategy, not a method, not a rigid plan. It was simply a shift in identity. You accepted a new vision of yourself and the habits appeared like shadows following the form. To explain this may sound too simple. Yet simplicity is always the mark of truth. And the more you lean into this, the more expansive it becomes. You begin to see that this same law applies not only to health, but to wealth, to relationships, to creativity, to every corner of life. Wherever you assume a new self, the habits of that self appear. Wherever you accept a new identity, the patterns of action align. It is always the same process, always the same law. Change within, and the without must reflect it. So you live now with a quiet assurance. No matter what the outer circumstances appear to be, no matter how strong the old habits once seemed, you know the truth. Identity is stronger than circumstance. Imagination is stronger than history, assumption is stronger than effort. And from this truth flows a life where healthy habits are no longer something you pursue. They are something you embody. So understand this. You are not trying to build healthy habits, you are awakening to the truth that you already are the person who lives them. Every habit you seek is simply waiting for you to accept the identity from which it flows. The struggle ends the moment you decide, within yourself, that the old story has no power, and the new self is already alive. From that choice, everything else aligns. The food, the movement, the energy, the focus. Life is not asking you to fight for change. It is inviting you to assume it. And once you assume it, the universe bends to your decision. You are free this very moment. For you hold the power to imagine yourself anew. Step into that vision. Live from it, and watch as the habits of health, strength, and vitality rise up naturally to meet you. The law never fails. You become what you accept, and your world becomes the mirror of your choice.